Towson, but certainly the Ravens on a 3-game winning streak. We're headed to the Confluence on Sunday night. Luke Jones and I will be there for all things Stillers and Ravens. But in the meantime, there is basketball happening, as well as hockey and a whole bunch of other things. But the Terps had a very weird start to December and a weird weekend of Big Ten basketball brought on by the Big Ten tournament being played at Madison Square Garden in late February, not even into March this year. And I know it's got to be weird for Coach Turgeon, or any coach for that matter. He is ex-Coach Knoche out on Twitter, and the longtime color voice of Terps basketball, along with our dear friend Johnny Holiday and the Wizard Walt Williams. He is Chris Knoche. We welcome him back onto the program after a little respite here. And, you know, we thought these games were supposed to be easy in November, December. Then they throw these Big Ten games in on you. It was quite the crowd we had down at College Park on Friday night, then a quick trip out to Champaign, but a little weird from a coaching aspect, right, Chris?
I'd say, you know, it was not only do you have Big Ten games in December, but you had really, it was 5 games in 10 days. And there were some pretty tough games, tough places to play. And, you know, it was pretty telling, you know, I think pretty telling in terms of maybe what the potential of this team is, and certainly telling in terms of, you know, the things they need to work on and areas they need to get better. And, you know, so right now with the win on Sunday night, you at least you split. It would have been murder, Nestor, to be sitting here for the next month at 0-2 in the Big Ten. So to have earned that split with a win on Sunday in Champaign, you know, puts a little different perspective on the first 10 games of the season.
Well, I mean, let's just go through it in general. You know, obviously some disappointing losses. A loss earlier in the year, the St. Bonaventure thing, is sort of difficult, I think, for some folks to think themselves through. Syracuse, you understand at the end, fine team. Same thing with Purdue. You know, I think everyone thought Purdue would be a better team than Maryland this year. Probably better to measure them in February or March than to be measuring them the last weekend in November. But that being said, I felt like Maryland held its own. I felt like the crowd showed up. The kids are showing up. I think we can see potential. I don't think the same potential about this team as maybe I did 2 years ago when it really felt like they had pieces where they could win a national championship. But certainly this feels like a team that's very capable of making the tournament, winning some games, and being a factor literally with anybody there on the floor with the rest of the way this side of Michigan State, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And you know, the St. Bonaventure is one you know, you're going to have to make up somewhere along the road where, you know, in a game that nobody expects you to win. That's a painful loss. It was painful then. It's probably even more painful now. You know, Syracuse, I think you're at a disadvantage, though, you know, when you go in there, you know, it's a building we play in once every 10 years, you know, at this point in time.
Well, it's like shooting in a blimp, right? I mean, it literally is a dome game, and they've always had that advantage up there. Every shooting team in the Big East struggled up there for 20 years, right?
Well, yeah, that's true, and part of that has to do, of course, with the talent and the length that Syracuse generally offers. You know, they've usually got a pretty damn good team, so you know, you got to give them props for that.
If you're not cheating, you're not trying. That's just my little cheap shot at Boeheim. That's all. I
got you. You know, I just think that the team, one of the areas where it really needs to get better, and maybe Sunday was sort of a directional game from this perspective. It's you know, just has to get better with decision making down the stretch of games. And, you know, there's really no other way to put it. Any one of those games, St. Bonnie's, Syracuse, Purdue, you know, those might go in a little different directions. Those are 3 losses by a total of 9 points. And any one of those could have gone in a little different direction with, you know, maybe a little bit better decision making. But that's, you know, that's part of the process too. I don't play, but Maryland lost one of the great closers in the recent history of the game, and Melo Trimble. I mean, it was just remarkable what he was able to do down the stretch of games. And so there's going to be a vacuum, and you just got to figure it out as you go along. One of the real highlights to me about Sunday night's win at Champaign was the fact that Justin Jackson finally showed up. He just had not been playing well at all, and he made some big plays down the stretch of the game. And of course, Anthony Cowan was spectacular for most of it. But you know, they just sort of figuring it all out, and it's not. It is a process. It's not one of those things where you can work on situations, which I know they do every single day in practice, down 3 minutes to play, that sort of a thing. That's the most fun part of practice. And you can do it all day long, but until you're out there with 17,000 people, on an away court, that's just one of those things you just have to figure it out as you go along. And hopefully we're seeing some maturation here with the win on Sunday night.
Well, certainly a lot of meat on this thing when they play these Big Ten games, because usually we don't have these sort of measurements as to where they are. And you said, realizing their potential. What is their potential this year, Chris? What is your belief for them against the Big Ten? And you're like, well, they need to win a game they're not supposed to win. I don't know that they have a whole lot more of those beyond Michigan State and maybe a Minnesota game. I mean, there's only 3 games left on the whole calendar from here on out that I would say, well, that's going to be a struggle. The rest of these games, I don't want to say I expect them to go on the road and win at Nebraska or Northwestern or Indiana for that matter, but I feel like they're certainly capable of winning any of those games.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things, one of the things that this group, and when I say this group, the core are the 3 sophomores, right? And one of the things that they were able to demonstrate last year, and again, they had Mello with them, but one of the things that they were able to demonstrate last year is that they could win on the road. They had some fortitude, and the win Sunday night was part of that too. Somehow, some way you just sort of figure it out and find a way. So I do expect these guys to be good in Big Ten play. I expect them to be in the NCAA tournament. Anything short of that would be very disappointing. And I'm not telling tales out of school. I think all these guys feel that way. They've been in the tournament for 3 straight years. You establish something. You don't want to be part of a group that doesn't live up to that. And then in terms of their potential, I think sometimes, and I hate to put it on young guys like this, but I think their potential is directly tied to the progress of the 2 freshmen, Daryl Morcell and Bruno Fernando. I think that, they're the wild cards here. They're the most athletic kids on the team. They're game changers, and sometimes for better or worse. It's not always great stuff. But, I think those are the variables that are really intriguing about this team. And one of the reasons why they could be really, really good in February.
I'm kind of shocked that Wiley and Nickens have never. I mean, it feels like they've been here 8 years. It feels like they're 2 scholarships at this point, because it just feels like they've been around and they've been around. And Nickens has hit some big shots over the course of time. Just not getting on the floor. It maybe says something about them, but it also maybe says something about the kind of recruiting that Bino, Turgeon, and the group's done here over the last couple of years to bring in guys, whether it was the sophomores now and the big 3, as we like to refer to them, or even the 2 freshmen that are just getting all of the minutes at this point.
Yeah, and I feel for those guys to a degree because they've put in some time, and Dion has weathered a couple of seasons of injuries. So you always want better for guys like that. Jared Nickens has been a solid 4-year guy. I mean, he's a senior who probably started 20 or 30 games in his career. But ultimately, talent prevails, and particularly if Mark Turgeon, defense prevails, and Morcell is just a better option than those guys. And I think sometimes too, Turge thinks that Dion and Jared need some medication because they're just allergic to the paint. You don't see them around the basket very much, and I think that in a perfect world, I think you'd see them being, particularly Dion, far more aggressive in terms of getting the shot. He did on Sunday night get to the rim a couple of times, make a couple of plays, but I just think that they're subs at this point in time, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that in a critical way, but right now they need to find a role, probably as 6th, 7th men. And I know Dion is the sort of a starter, but it's a nominal starter. Daryl Morcell gets most of those minutes at that spot. So I mean they're like the rest of the team. They got to figure it out right now. They're 10 games in, still got, as you say, plenty of meat left on the bone, and they'll figure it out.
Well, speaking of the meat on it, Illinois, you make a trip out there. It's not 5 degrees in the middle of February. Coming off being really tested on Friday night by Purdue at home and losing that game, and obviously the Syracuse game. I mean, it has felt like a different level of basketball, literally over the last couple of hours of basketball they've played, than even where they were with St. Bonaventure or any of the teams that they were seeing before this or that they're going to see over the next 2 or 3 weeks here. But the Illinois thing, the blown lead, and I have no idea what Turgeon said to you with 2 seconds left and down 2 buckets. What did he say? Because you shook your head. What did he say? Come on, let us in on this, Chris.
It's not particularly suitable for radio, Nestor, but basically he said, let me paraphrase here. He said, I cannot get a call in this building. So I'll leave it at that. And for anybody who saw the play and the replay of the play, it was just an awful missed call. I mean, Cowan was clearly hit. I mean, it ended up being things somehow miraculously worked out, but he was really upset about the officiating down the stretch of the game.
Does that make you feel nice that when he wants the vent, he comes over to you? Makes you're not an ex-coach at that point. You're still in the game at that point, Chris.
Well, you know, it's funny when he says that. The first thing that comes to mind, and he looks at me and he says that, is I feel like saying, and I'll never return fire. Of course, I'll never respond because he's got a game to coach. But I feel like saying, dude, I have worn those shoes, you know, and it ain't a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, nobody wants to fight with the zebras on the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other, you know, the Illinois game was such a, you know, so many things happened. First of all, Nestor, it was 3 games. It was 3 different games. It was the first half. It was the second half that miraculously ended with a tip-in that, you know, you might not ever see again in a situation like that. And then you get the overtime where, you know, the opponent, Illinois, shoots 5 for 5. 5 for 5. They didn't miss a shot. They didn't have a turnover. They missed 1 free throw, and they lost. How does that happen? That never happens. So it was just a sort of a confluence of things, and then you add into that, you know, this little salt and pepper here. You add this to the souffle. You get you know, basically Illinois plays a style where they hack you on every single play. There's a foul, and it's just the way they play defensively. They're aggressive. They overplay everything. And it's just the officials aren't going to call everything. They stopped calling things midway through. And so then you add in the fact that, you know, now Turge and the Terps feel like, well, we're getting nothing out of our trips to the basket. And that, you know, they got a little tight. Crowd got into it. And, you know, there was just a lot going on in that game. They were literally, I say this, I always talk about this, about playing 40 on the radio. Sometimes you got to play 45. But in that game, there were hundreds of plays, and you just got to keep going. You got to keep playing. Can't worry about the last one. You got to deal with the next one.
Yeah, I'd say when the score's 92-91 and you play OT and you blow a 22-point lead, you know, we could sit here and dissect this one for days, and at least they'll get back up, play Ohio later on in the week. Ex-coach Knoche is the way to find Chris Knoche. He, of course, along with Johnny Holiday and the Wizard, make up the voice of Maryland Terps Radio, and you can follow him at ex-coach Knoche out on Twitter. This report here and all of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Al's Seafood in Essex. Been getting crabs and crab cakes there since the 1970s. It is the oldest crab cake house in Baltimore. Crab house in Baltimore, I should say. Crab cakes come with the operation. There's Stemmers and Eastern down in Essex at the foot of 702. Go see Chad, the crab man. Tell him we said hello. Also got to tell you about Compass Point Golf Course down in Pasadena. It is the best place to play this fall and winter. Great events, craft beer, friendly group, and open on all good days when you can bring out a Parker or even a little windbreaker. CompassPointGolf.com. And, of course, we'll be talking some college basketball as well with Robert Kennedy, who monitors all the small schools around here. Coach Knoche is getting off a plane and trying to get it all together. Okay, so things calm down here a little bit, right, for Turgeon and for all these guys, and trying to get health back and trying to get everybody ready to go. Ohio later in the week, Gardner-Webb Catholic University. There's a little bit of a ramping down for all of this, and I think a level of expectation to beat the snot out of all these teams after running through Syracuse and Purdue and out to the middle of the Midwest last week.
Yeah, you know, you get 5 games here, all of them at home, and you do kind of ramp down. Ohio U is actually pretty good. Of the 5, they're clearly the best team, and that's Thursday night. You know, you also have to – this is also when guys – you worry about distractions, and I hate to ever refer to school and final exams as distractions, but these guys have a lot on their plate right now. So I think the idea, and I wasn't in the locker room directly after the game, but I believe after the 5 games in 10 days, I think they're taking both today and most of tomorrow off. I think tomorrow they're lifting and maybe shooting a little bit, but you do need, you know, you worry about the fact that you played so much recently. You do need to ramp it back up for the Ohio game for sure, and you're going to give everybody an opportunity to play here over the next couple of weeks. It might be a really good stretch for these guys to get healthy, to lick their wounds, to kick a little butt in the school and with final exams, winter, and then you got winter break looking at you, and a bit more Big Ten play right after the first of the year.
Ex-Coach Knoche is the way to follow him and all things Terrapins for the season, of course, out a little more quiet, and then it's going to ramp back up. Just some observations about Purdue, because we haven't talked about that game at all, and that was at home, and everybody came, and it was loud, and it was raucous, and it sort of came down to the end, but I never felt like they were going to win the game, strangely enough. I felt like Purdue had kind of a handle on them, and maybe it's the pedigree, and maybe it's my thoughts about Purdue as a team, and I know they haven't come out of the gate as well as that maybe they would have wished they would have, but and lost a couple games a couple weeks ago. But that being said, they look to be that classy team, and they're also coming off of losing some great kids last year.
Yeah, and they're an anomaly too, Nestor. They start 4 seniors, and I thought one of the differences in that game was, the Terps, a much younger team, played in peaks and valleys. And Purdue, for the most part, was really unflappable in that game. Every time the Terps made a run, they responded. And I just thought they played like the more mature team. And it's early in the season, huge advantage to them to play that game in December. It'll be interesting to see where both these teams are at the end of the year. I think Purdue's terrific. They're well coached. They're big they got the 2 huge guys in the middle that you have to deal with, and Isaac Haas just dominated the game in College Park. I just thought the maturity was really telling in that game, and they probably deserve to win the game, no doubt.
All right, well, we're onward and upward, and certainly it has been nice seeing a Baltimore kid get as many minutes. I mean, I'm assuming Morcell's going to be playing more than 23, 24 minutes by the time we get into Big Ten, right? I mean, he really has been a little bit of the wild card and saying, well, there's the potential. That kid looks like he could be special.
Yeah, and if he starts knocking down shots, and I know he can, and I know he will, he's athletic. He can get his shot anytime he wants it. And he just works his tail off on defense. Yeah, he's gonna get a lot more minutes.
Coach, rest up. It's been a long, brutal weekend here. We'll get you back to the Big Ten action again in a couple of weeks. We'll take a little breather for you and Turge and all the folks down there at College Park. Always appreciate the visits with you. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime, Nestor. Thank you.
Ex-Coach Knoche joining us here. That's the way to find him out on Twitter. I call him Coach because he's once coach, always a coach. And if you go to the front of his Twitter and see Turgeon talking to him with 4 seconds left to go in the game out in Champaign on Sunday night, it is worth a laugh to see the look on Chris's face. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear, whether we're talking Terps or Caps or Ravens or Orioles, whatever it happens to be. Our morning newspaper has all of it in there. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness, and it delivers at 7 a.m. each and every morning digitally to your email inbox. Sign up once, you get it every morning. Planet Fitness, $10 a month, no commitment. You know the deal there. You can learn more at planetfitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard and Dennis Colazzos. Very excited about the Ravens' 3-game winning streak in Pittsburgh week. He will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. For my part, I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.